The
Take this.
gunshot
It will keep you
echoed
safe.
through the
How
pine
can I
forest,
accept?
sending a
Please, it's all I
flock
have
of
to give.
startled birds into the evening sky as Penelope Fletcher clutched her bleeding arm and ran deeper into the wilderness. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, the layers of her torn dress catching on brambles as she fled from the men who had murdered her father and burned their homestead to ashes. Montana Territory, 1876, was unforgiving to a woman alone, especially one carrying her father's research papers that powerful men would kill to possess. "Keep running," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Night was falling rapidly across the rugged landscape, and with it came the bitter cold of early spring in the mountains. Penelope had nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's satchel containing his geological survey's papers that had gotten him killed when he refused to sell his findings to the mining company. Blood trickled down her arm as she stumbled forward, her vision blurring. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the wound, while not deep, had been bleeding steadily. The forest floor tilted beneath her feet, and Penelope collapsed against the rough bark of a towering pine tree. She couldn't go any further. With trembling hands, she tore a strip from her petticoat and bound her arm, tying it as tightly as she could manage. The makeshift bandage quickly darkened with blood, but it would have to do. She needed shelter, something to protect her from both the elements and the men who pursued her. A hollow at the base of a massive fallen tree caught her attention. It wasn't much, but it would hide her from immediate view. Penelope dragged herself toward it, gathering pine needles and leaves to cover her tracks as she went. The hollow was damp and cramped, but she wedged herself inside, pulling her father's satchel close to her chest. "I promise I'll see this through, Papa," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. Her father had died believing those papers would reveal a gold deposit that could change their fortunes. But now she only wanted to survive long enough to expose the men who had murdered him. As darkness enveloped the forest, Penelope shivered uncontrollably. The temperature dropped rapidly, and her thin dress offered little protection. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and thirst parched her throat. She drifted in and out of consciousness, fever setting in as infection took hold in her wound. Dawn came with no improvement. Penelope's arm throbbed with fiery pain, her skin hot to the touch despite the morning chill. She knew she needed to find water, but when she tried to crawl from her hiding place, her limbs refused to cooperate. Falling back into the hollow, she closed her eyes, wondering if this forest would be her final resting place. The sound of approaching hoofbeats jerked her back to consciousness. Terror gripped her heart had they found her. She pressed herself deeper into the hollow, willing herself to become invisible. The horse stopped nearby, and she heard the creak of leather as its rider dismounted. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "I know someone's out here. I followed your trail." Penelope held her breath, tears stinging her eyes. She wouldn't be taken without a fight, though she had nothing to fight with. Footsteps approached her hiding place, and suddenly, a man's face appeared at the opening of the hollow. Sunlight silhouetted him, preventing her from seeing his features clearly. "Madam, are you hurt?" His voice was gentler now, concern evident in his tone. "Stay back," Penelope rasped, her voice weak. "I won't go with you." "Go with me where, madam? I'm just passing through these parts." Saw signs of someone injured. He crouched down, and Penelope could now see his face weather-beaten and tanned, with kind blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. "My name's Daniel Blackwood. I'm not looking to cause you any trouble." "They'll kill me," she whispered, her eyes darting past him to scan the forest. "The mining company men." Daniel's expression darkened. "The Silverton outfit," Penelope nodded weakly, surprise flickering across her face. "Those bastards have been terrorizing homesteaders all across the territory," he said grimly. "You're safe now, madam. I've got no love for them or their methods." He extended a hand toward her. "You need medical attention. That arm looks bad." Penelope hesitated, clutching her father's satchel tighter. "How do I know I can trust you?" Daniel removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "You don't. But you won't last another night out here alone, and that's a fact." He gestured to her arm. "That wound's infected. I've got a cabin about 3 hours' ride from here. Clean water, medicine, food. After you're better, you can go wherever you please." The sincerity in his eyes made Penelope want to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that men rarely offered help without expecting something in return. Still, she had few options: death by infection in this hollow or take a chance on this stranger. "My father's papers," she said weakly. "They killed him for them. I can't let them fall into the wrong hands." "Whatever's in that satchel stays with you," Daniel promised. "Now please, let me help you before it's too late." The world spun as Penelope tried to move. Her body, weakened by hunger, blood loss, and fever, had reached its limit. As darkness closed in around her vision, she felt strong arms lifting her gently. "You're safe now," was the last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away. When Penelope awoke, she was lying on a bed covered with a warm quilt. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window, illuminating a simple but clean cabin. Her arm had been properly bandaged, and someone had changed her into a large shirt that must have belonged to Daniel. For a moment, panic seized her at the thought of a stranger undressing her, but then she noticed a woman sitting in a chair near the bed. "Well, good morning, sunshine," the elderly woman said, setting aside her knitting. "Thought we might lose you there for a while." "I'm Martha Jenkins, Daniel's neighbor from down the valley." "My father's satchel," Penelope said immediately, trying to sit up. "Right there beside the bed, dear. Daniel was most insistent that it stay with you." Martha helped Penelope sit up, adjusting pillows behind her back. "That boy brought you here 2 days ago looking half dead. Rode straight to my place after getting you settled, knowing a woman's touch was needed. 2 days. Penelope had lost 2 days to fever. The men who were chasing me, no sign of them," Martha assured her. "Daniel's been keeping watch. This cabin is well off any trails, and he covered your tracks when he brought you in." She poured a cup of water from a pitcher. "Now drink this. You're dehydrated something terrible." Penelope drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Jenkins." "Martha, please. And you're Penelope Fletcher, according to the letter we found in your satchel." Martha's eyes softened. "Daniel told me about your father. I'm sorry for your loss, child." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes at the mention of her father. "They shot him in cold blood. Right in front of me. All because he wouldn't sell information about a gold deposit he'd discovered." Martha patted her hand gently. "Rest now. There'll be time for talking later. Daniel's out hunting, but he'll be back by sundown with fresh meat for stew." True to Martha's word, Daniel returned as the sun was setting, a brace of rabbits in hand. Penelope was dozing when the door opened, but she woke instantly, years of living on the frontier having trained her to be alert to any sound. "She's awake and doing better," Martha informed Daniel as he hung his hat on a peg by the door. "Fever's down and the wound's looking cleaner. Your poultice did the trick." Daniel approached the bed, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. "Good to see some color back in your cheeks, Miss Fletcher." "Mr. Blackwood," Penelope acknowledged. "I owe you my life." He waved away her thanks. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most would have left me to die or worse." She met his gaze directly. "Thank you." A faint blush colored his tan cheeks. "You're welcome. How's the arm feeling?" "Better. Still painful, but the burning sensation has subsided. Martha bustled between them. Daniel, those rabbits won't skin themselves, and I should get home before dark. My old bones don't take well to riding at night. I'll walk you to your horse, Daniel offered, setting the rabbits aside. As they left the cabin, Penelope heard Martha's voice drift through the partly open door. She's a pretty one, Daniel, and brave too, from what you've told me. She's been through hell, Martha. Don't go getting ideas. I'm just saying that cabin of yours has been lonely too long since Sarah passed. Their voices faded as they moved away from the cabin. Penelope felt a pang of guilt for eavesdropping, but the information answered questions she'd had about her rescuer. He was a widower then. That explained the sadness she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. Daniel returned shortly and set to work preparing the rabbits. Penelope watched him, noting the efficient way his hands moved. Martha seems nice, she ventured. Daniel smiled. Salt of the earth. Been like a mother to me since I settled here 5 years ago. He glanced up from his work. She tell you my whole life story while I was gone? No, but I overheard about your wife. I'm sorry. His hand stilled momentarily. Sarah died of pneumonia 3 winters back. We'd been married just 2 years. He resumed his task, not meeting Penelope's eyes. Life out here is hard on women. It's hard on everyone, Penelope replied softly. My mother died when I was 12. It's been just Papa and me since then. Tears threatened again at the use of present tense, the habit not yet broken. Was just Papa and me, she corrected. Daniel nodded in understanding. Martha said they killed him for information about gold. Penelope explained about her father's work as a geologist, mapping potential mining sites throughout the territory. He discovered a significant deposit on land that hadn't been claimed yet. He was going to file the claim himself, give us a chance at a better life. Her voice hardened. The Silverton Mining Company got wind of it. They offered to buy his maps, but Papa refused. He knew their reputation, how they treat their workers, the corners they cut on safety. They're worse than that, Daniel said grimly. They've been running small operators out of business all over the territory. Anyone who stands in their way tends to meet with accidents. Like my father, Penelope whispered. Daniel set aside his work and poured her another cup of water. Those papers in your satchel, they're the maps to the gold deposit, Penelope nodded. And Papa's journal detailing all of Silverton's illegal activities. He'd been gathering evidence, planning to take it to the territorial governor. That makes you doubly dangerous to them, Daniel observed. You're welcome to stay here until you're healed up. After that, I can help you get to Helena to speak with the authorities. Why would you risk yourself for me? Penelope asked, studying his face for signs of ulterior motives. Daniel returned to preparing their dinner. Let's just say I've got my own reasons for wanting to see Silverton Mining Company get what's coming to them. Over the next week, Penelope's strength returned gradually. The wound on her arm healed without further infection, though Martha warned it would leave a scar. Daniel proved to be a considerate host, giving Penelope space while ensuring she had everything she needed. One evening, as they sat before the fire eating venison stew, Penelope finally asked the question that had been on her mind. What's your connection to Silverton Mining? Daniel was silent for so long that Penelope thought he might not answer. Finally, he set down his bowl. My younger brother worked for them. 18 years old, first job away from home. There was a cave-in at one of their mines near Butte. 13 men died. I'm sorry, Penelope said softly. The official report said it was an accident, but a friend of my brother's who survived told a different story. Said they'd been warning the foreman about improper shoring for weeks. Company didn't want to spend the money to do it right. His jaw tightened. They paid off the territorial inspector to look the other way. That's why you live out here alone, Penelope realized. You're hiding from them too. Daniel shook his head. Not hiding. Waiting. Gathering evidence just like your father was, only I haven't had much luck. He gestured to her satchel. Your father's journal might be the missing piece I've been looking for. Penelope considered his words. She'd been planning to take the papers directly to the territorial governor, but the journey to Helena would be dangerous, especially with Silverton's men searching for her. We could work together, she suggested. Combine what we know. A genuine smile spread across Daniel's face, transforming his features. I'd like that, Miss Fletcher. Penelope, she corrected him. I think we're beyond formalities now, Daniel. Something shifted between them in that moment, a sense of partnership forming that went beyond their shared enemy. As they talked late into the night, comparing notes and forming plans, Penelope found herself watching the way the firelight played across Daniel's features, highlighting the strength in his jaw and the kindness in his eyes. By the end of her second week at the cabin, Penelope was able to move around freely, though her arm remained in a sling. Daniel had given her some of Sarah's old clothes, which fit well enough after minor alterations. She insisted on taking over cooking duties to repay his kindness, and they fell into a comfortable routine. One afternoon, as Penelope was hanging laundry outside, she spotted a rider approaching through the trees. Panic seized her and she dropped the wet shirt she was holding, rushing inside the cabin. Daniel, someone's coming, she called urgently. Daniel immediately grabbed his rifle from above the door. Stay inside, he instructed, stepping onto the porch. Penelope watched through the window as the rider drew closer. To her relief, it was Martha, looking uncharacteristically agitated. Silverton men in the valley, Martha announced without preamble as she dismounted. 4 of them, asking questions at every homestead. Showing a drawing of a young woman, Daniel's expression darkened. How far? They were at the Thompson place when I left. That's less than 2 hours from here. Martha caught her breath. They've got a man with them who claims to be a U.S. Marshal, but I've never seen a lawman who looks that shifty. Likely bought and paid for, Daniel muttered. He turned to Penelope, who had joined them on the porch. We need to move. They'll be checking every cabin in the area. Where can we go? Penelope asked, fear evident in her voice. Daniel thought for a moment. There's an old trapper's cabin farther up in the mountains. It's well hidden, and most folks don't know about it. He turned to Martha. Can you create a diversion? Maybe mention seeing a woman matching Penelope's description heading toward Bozeman. Martha nodded. I can do better than that. I'll say I gave her a ride to the stage depot myself 3 days ago. She patted Penelope's hand. Don't you worry, dear. Those vultures won't get any information from me. As Martha rode off to lay her false trail, Daniel and Penelope quickly gathered essential supplies. Penelope carefully packed her father's satchel inside a saddlebag where it would be protected from the elements. How long will we need to hide? She asked, as Daniel saddled 2 horses. Until we can get those papers to someone who can act on them, he replied. I have a friend in Helena, a lawyer who's been looking for a way to bring down Silverton for years. If we can get your father's evidence to him, he might be able to convince the governor to take action. They rode out within the hour, taking a steep trail that wound higher into the mountains. Daniel led the way, occasionally stopping to obscure their tracks or check for signs of pursuit. Penelope followed silently, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had brought danger to this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. The trail grew increasingly difficult as they climbed, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through particularly treacherous sections. By late afternoon, clouds had gathered and a light rain began to fall. It's not much further, Daniel assured her, noting her fatigue. The rain's a blessing, it'll wash away our tracks. When they finally reached the trapper's cabin, Penelope was exhausted. The small structure was crude compared to Daniel's home, with gaps in the walls and a partially collapsed roof, but it offered shelter from the worsening storm. "It's not much," Daniel apologized as he helped her dismount, "but no one will find us here." While Daniel took care of the horses, securing them in a small lean-to attached to the cabin, Penelope assessed their temporary home. A rustic stone fireplace dominated one wall, and there was a rough-hewn table with a single chair. The only sleeping accommodation was a narrow platform built against the far wall, presumably where the trapper had laid his bedroll. Daniel entered, shaking rain from his hat. "I'll get a fire going. It gets cold up here at night." As he worked to kindle a flame, Penelope unpacked the food they had brought: biscuits, jerky, and some dried apples. It wasn't much, but it would sustain them for a few days. "I'm sorry about all this," she said suddenly. "You've been nothing but kind, and I've brought nothing but trouble to your door." Daniel looked up from the fireplace. "Don't apologize. I got involved in this fight long before I found you in those woods." The fire caught, casting flickering light across his serious features. "Besides, I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd left you there." They ate a simple dinner as the storm intensified outside, wind howling through the gaps in the walls. Despite the discomfort, Penelope felt strangely secure in Daniel's presence. She watched as he moved around the cabin, making small repairs where he could, his strong hands working methodically. "You said you've been gathering evidence against Silverton," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What have you found so far?" Daniel settled beside her near the fire. "Statements from miners about safety violations, records of payoffs to officials, names of men who have disappeared after speaking out." He sighed. "But nothing concrete enough to stand up in court. Your father's journal could change that." Penelope retrieved the journal from her satchel and handed it to him. "See for yourself." As Daniel read through the meticulous notes, his expression grew increasingly grim. "Your father was thorough. Dates, names, specific violations, and these geological surveys." He looked up at her. "This isn't just about one gold deposit. These maps show that Silverton has been illegally mining on government land for years." "That's why they were so desperate to silence him," Penelope said softly. "It wasn't just about the new gold find, it was about exposing their entire operation." Daniel closed the journal reverently. "Your father was a brave man, Penelope." "He was," she agreed, tears stinging her eyes. "And now it's up to me to finish what he started." As night fell, the question of sleeping arrangements became unavoidable. The platform was barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. "You take the bed," Daniel said, spreading his bedroll on the floor near the fire. "I'll be fine down here." Penelope wanted to protest, but the ache in her healing arm and the exhaustion from their journey convinced her to accept his offer. She climbed onto the platform, pulling the blanket he offered around her shoulders. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He nodded, his face half in shadow. "Get some rest. We've got a long journey ahead of us." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Penelope. The storm raged outside, rain pattering on the roof and wind finding every gap in the walls. She could see Daniel lying near the fire, one arm thrown over his eyes, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of sleep. The sudden crack of a tree branch breaking nearby startled her fully awake. Daniel was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Probably just the wind," he whispered, but his tense posture suggested he wasn't convinced. They listened intently, and then came the unmistakable sound of a horse nickering. Their own horses answered from the lean-to. "Someone's out there," Penelope breathed, fear clutching at her heart. Daniel moved to the window, carefully peering out into the stormy night. A flash of lightning illuminated the clearing in front of the cabin, revealing 4 mounted figures approaching slowly. "It's them," he confirmed grimly. "They must have followed our trail before the rain washed it away." Penelope grabbed her father's satchel, clutching it to her chest. "What do we do?" Daniel thought quickly. "There's a root cellar under the cabin. It's small, but you can hide there with the papers." He moved the threadbare rug aside, revealing a trapdoor. "I'll try to convince them I'm alone up here, just a trapper waiting out the storm." "And if they don't believe you?" Penelope asked, her voice trembling. Daniel checked his rifle, his expression resolute. "Then I'll do what needs doing, but I need you to promise me something." He met her eyes intently. "If things go bad, there's a back way out of the cellar. It comes up about 50 yards behind the cabin, hidden in the underbrush. Take a horse and ride east. There's a settlement called Copper Creek about 20 miles from here. Ask for Judge William Parker. He's a good man, honest. Give him the papers." "I'm not leaving you," Penelope protested. "You have to," Daniel insisted. "Your father died for those papers. Don't let that be for nothing." A heavy knock on the door cut their conversation short. Daniel quickly helped Penelope down into the root cellar, passing her a small oil lamp. "Don't light it unless you have to," he whispered. "And whatever you hear, stay hidden until you're sure it's safe." Penelope caught his hand before he closed the trapdoor. "Be careful," she urged, her eyes conveying everything she couldn't say aloud. Daniel nodded once, then closed the trapdoor and replaced the rug. Penelope heard him cross the cabin floor, followed by the creak of the door opening. "Evening," Daniel's voice came, casual but wary. "Nasty night to be out riding." "Looking for a fugitive," a gruff voice replied. "Young woman, dark hair. Killed a man in Silverton's mining camp and stole valuable company property." "Haven't seen anyone in these parts for weeks," Daniel answered. "Just me up here, trapping beaver when the weather allows. Mind if we come in and warm ourselves? It's mighty cold out here." There was a pause, and Penelope held her breath. Then came the sound of multiple footsteps entering the cabin. "Small place you got here," the same voice commented. "Been trapping long, few years," Daniel replied. "Not much money in it anymore, but it keeps me fed." "Odd to see 2 horses in your lean-to for a man trapping alone," another voice observed. Penelope's heart sank. They'd seen the horses. "One's a pack horse," Daniel explained smoothly. "Can't carry all my traps and pelts on one mount." "That right." The first voice had lost its conversational tone. "Funny thing is, we've been tracking a horse with a distinctive shoe missing a nail on the left front. Horse just like the one outside." The atmosphere in the cabin above seemed to crackle with tension. Penelope pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle her breathing. "I don't want trouble," Daniel said evenly. "But you boys need to move on. There's no woman here. Search the place," the leader ordered. Penelope heard the sounds of furniture being moved, bags being emptied. She clutched her father's satchel tighter, praying they wouldn't find the trapdoor. "Nothing here, Mr. Hawkins," someone reported. "Check outside again. She's got to be close." Footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. "You know, Trapper, I don't think you're being straight with us. That second horse, it's got a side saddle." "Belonged to my late wife," Daniel said, his voice harder now. "I kept it." "He's lying," another voice cut in. "I saw fresh tracks before the rain got heavy. 2 horses, one carrying a lighter rider." "Last chance," the leader Hawkins said menacingly. "Where is Penelope Fletcher?" "Never heard of her," Daniel replied. The sudden sound of a scuffle erupted above, followed by the crash of furniture. Penelope bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, fighting the urge to rush up and help Daniel. A gunshot rang out, the sound deafening in the confined space of the cabin. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing. "You shouldn't have done that, Trapper," Hawkins said coldly. Now we'll have to do this the hard way. Another scuffle, another gunshot. Then Daniel's voice strained but defiant. You'll never find those papers, Hawkins. They're already on their way to the governor. A harsh laugh. Nice try. The girl hasn't left these mountains. We've had every trail watched. A pause. But you know where she is, don't you? And you're going to tell me. What followed were sounds that would haunt Penelope forever, the dull thud of fists meeting flesh, Daniel's muffled grunts of pain as they beat him for information he refused to give. Enough, Hawkins finally said. He's not talking. Burn the place down. If the girl's nearby, the fire will smoke her out. If not, at least this one won't be interfering anymore. What about him? Someone asked. Leave him. The fire will take care of it. Penelope heard the sounds of oil being splashed around the cabin, followed by the whoosh of flames catching. Footsteps receded, and horses galloped away into the stormy night. The moment they were gone, Penelope pushed open the trapdoor. Smoke was already filling the cabin as she emerged. Daniel lay on the floor, his face bloody and bruised, unmoving. "Daniel," she cried, rushing to his side. To her immense relief, his eyes fluttered open. "Told you to stay hidden," he mumbled through swollen lips. "We need to get out of here," she said urgently, helping him to his feet. The flames were spreading rapidly, consuming the dry wood of the old cabin. Daniel leaned heavily on her as they stumbled toward the door. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with mud. They made it to the lean-to where their frightened horses neighed and stamped. "Can you ride?" Penelope asked, looking at Daniel's battered form with concern. He nodded grimly. "No choice." They mounted quickly, Daniel wincing as he pulled himself into the saddle. Penelope looked back at the burning cabin, flames now shooting through the roof into the night sky. "Which way?" she asked. Daniel pointed east in the direction of Copper Creek. "We'll have a head start. They think I'm in there, and they think you're either hiding nearby or already gone to the governor." They rode through the night, keeping to the shadows of the forest whenever possible. Daniel grew weaker as they traveled, occasionally swaying in his saddle. Penelope rode close beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. Dawn found them still in the mountains, but descending toward more hospitable terrain. Daniel insisted they stop to rest the horses, though Penelope suspected it was he who needed the respite most. As they sat beneath a rocky overhang, sharing the last of their food, Penelope examined Daniel's injuries. His face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen shut, and she suspected he had broken ribs from the way he winced when he breathed. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly, using a dampened cloth to clean dried blood from his temple. "Why risk your life for me, for my father's papers?" Daniel caught her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle despite his battered knuckles. "Because it was the right thing to do." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his expression. "And because from the moment I found you in those woods, I couldn't bear the thought of any harm coming to you." The simple honesty in his words made Penelope's heart flutter. She had tried to deny the growing feelings between them, telling herself it was merely gratitude on her part, or perhaps loneliness on his. But in that moment, with dawn breaking over the mountains and danger still pursuing them, she acknowledged the truth. "I was afraid," she admitted. "When I heard them hurting you, I wanted to run up there. Consequences be damned." "I'm glad you didn't," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "If anything happened to you—" He didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. Penelope leaned forward and gently, mindful of his injuries, pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, tentative, but filled with promise. "We should keep moving," she whispered as she pulled away. Daniel nodded, a new light in his eyes despite the pain. "Copper Creek is still a good day's ride, but there's a homestead about 4 hours from here. Family named Russell. Good people. They might give us shelter." They rode more carefully now, knowing that Hawkins and his men would soon discover Daniel had escaped the fire. The terrain became less steep as they descended, forests giving way to occasional meadows bright with spring wildflowers. By midday, they spotted the Russell homestead, a sturdy cabin with a barn and corral, set in a small valley with a creek running alongside it. Smoke rose from the chimney, and laundry flapped on a line, signs of domestic life that seemed impossibly normal after the violence of the previous night. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, spotted them first, running toward the cabin shouting for his pa. A tall man emerged, rifle in hand, watching warily as they approached. "That's far enough," he called when they were within earshot. "State your business." Daniel raised a hand in greeting. "Thomas Russell. I'm Daniel Blackwood. We met at the county fair 2 summers back. You sold me that bay mare." Recognition dawned on the man's face. "Blackwood, what in God's name happened to you?" His eyes shifted to Penelope, taking in her disheveled appearance and Daniel's battered condition. "We're in trouble," Daniel said simply. "Need a place to rest, maybe some medical attention." Russell lowered his rifle. "Come on in then, Sarah," he called over his shoulder. "We've got visitors needing help." The Russell family proved to be as generous as Daniel had suggested. Sarah Russell, a capable woman with kind eyes, tended to Daniel's injuries while Thomas listened to their story. Their children, 2 boys and a girl, were sent to keep watch on the approach to the homestead. "Silverton's been causing trouble all over the territory," Thomas confirmed as he poured coffee for Penelope. "Drove my brother's mining operation out of business last year. Claimed he was on their land when his claim was filed 3 years before they even came to Montana." "Then you understand why these papers are so important," Penelope said, patting her father's satchel. "They prove Silverton has been operating illegally for years." Thomas nodded gravely. "And they'll kill to keep that quiet." He exchanged a look with his wife. "You can stay the night, rest up. Tomorrow I'll drive you to Copper Creek in the wagon. You'll attract less attention that way, and your horses could use the rest." That evening, after a hearty meal that reminded Penelope how long it had been since she'd sat at a proper family table, Sarah showed them to the small loft where they could sleep. 2 pallets had been prepared, with clean blankets and pillows. "It's not much," Sarah apologized, "but it's private and warm." "It's perfect," Penelope assured her. "Thank you for your kindness." When they were alone, Daniel eased himself carefully onto one of the pallets, grimacing in pain. Sarah had wrapped his ribs tightly and applied salve to his bruises, but he was still in considerable discomfort. "You should sleep," Penelope told him, sitting cross-legged on her own pallet. "Tomorrow will be another long day." Daniel nodded, but his eyes remained on her face. "What you did back there at the cabin, coming back for me, no one's done anything like that for me since Sarah died." Penelope felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I couldn't leave you. Most would have. Most would have taken those papers and saved themselves." He reached across the space between their pallets, taking her hand. "You're an extraordinary woman, Penelope Fletcher." She squeezed his hand gently. "And you're a good man, Daniel Blackwood, better than most I've known." They fell asleep that way, hands linked between them, finding comfort in each other's presence despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Morning came with a flurry of activity as the Russell family prepared for the journey to Copper Creek. Thomas hitched his team to the wagon while Sarah packed food and medical supplies. The children helped cover the wagon bed with canvas, creating a hidden space where Daniel and Penelope could ride undetected. 2 of Silverton's men rode by last night, Thomas informed them as they prepared to leave. "Didn't stop, but they were looking at every homestead they passed. They'll be back. Best if you're long gone by then." The journey to Copper Creek was slow but uneventful. Daniel and Penelope lay hidden beneath the canvas, the swaying of the wagon lulling them into a drowsy state despite their anxiety. They spoke little, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Copper Creek proved to be larger than Penelope had expected, a proper town with a main street, several businesses, and even a small hotel. Thomas drove directly to a modest building with a sign identifying it as the office of Judge William Parker. The judge was a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and piercing gray eyes. He listened intently as Penelope and Daniel presented their evidence, examining the papers with increasing interest. "This is extraordinary," he said finally, looking up from her father's journal. "With this evidence, we can not only shut down Silverton's illegal operations but potentially bring criminal charges against the company leadership." "Will it be enough?" Daniel asked. "Silverton has powerful friends." Judge Parker's expression hardened. "They do, but so do I. I've been corresponding with the territorial governor about Silverton's activities for months. He's been waiting for concrete evidence." He carefully gathered the papers. "I'll send these to Helena by special courier today, along with my own affidavit supporting your claims." "What about us?" Penelope asked. "Hawkins and his men won't stop looking. You'll stay here in Copper Creek under my protection," the judge declared. "I have a deputy U.S. Marshal stationed in town who is absolutely trustworthy. Once the governor receives these papers, he'll send official representatives to investigate. Until then, you'll be safe here." True to his word, Judge Parker arranged rooms for them at the hotel and posted the deputy marshal as guard. For the first time since her father's murder, Penelope felt truly safe. She bathed, changed into clean clothes provided by the judge's wife, and finally allowed herself to rest properly. That evening, Daniel came to her room for dinner, which the hotel had sent up to maintain their privacy. His face was still bruised, but the swelling had subsided, and he moved with less pain. "Judge Parker says the courier left for Helena this afternoon," he reported as they ate. "With good weather, the governor should have the papers within 3 days." Penelope nodded, relief washing over her. "It's almost over then." "Almost," Daniel agreed, though something in his tone suggested uncertainty. "What is it?" she asked, setting down her fork. "What's troubling you?" Daniel hesitated, then met her gaze directly. "When this is over, what will you do? Where will you go?" The question caught Penelope off guard. In the chaos of the past weeks, she hadn't thought beyond delivering her father's evidence. "I don't know," she admitted. "Our homestead is gone. I have some distant relatives in St. Louis, but I've never met them." "You could." Daniel began, then stopped, as if reconsidering his words. "That is, if you wanted, you could come back to my cabin. Not permanently, of course, just until you decide what's next." Penelope felt a smile tugging at her lips. Daniel Blackwood, who had faced down armed men without flinching, was nervous about inviting her to stay with him. "Is that what you want?" she asked softly. "For me to come back with you?" Color rose in his cheeks. "I know it's presumptuous. We've only known each other a short time, and you deserve better than a rough cabin in the wilderness." "But, Daniel," she interrupted gently, "in the past 3 weeks, you've saved my life multiple times, tended my wounds, protected me from killers, and endured torture rather than betray me." She reached across the table to take his hand. "I think I know your character better than most people I've known for years." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Does that mean?" "It means I'd like to come back with you," she confirmed. "Not just until I decide what's next, but because being with you is what I want next." The smile that spread across Daniel's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm, bright, and full of promise. He rose from his chair and moved around the table, kneeling beside her despite his injuries. "Penelope Fletcher," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this is sudden, and I have little to offer but my heart and my hands, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you. I think I began loving you the moment I found you in those woods." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "And I love you, Daniel Blackwood. Against all reason, against all propriety, I love you." He cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her, a kiss filled with tenderness and promise. When they parted, both were breathless and smiling. "When this is over," Daniel said, "will you marry me, build a life with me?" "Yes," Penelope answered without hesitation. "Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible cook." Daniel laughed, the sound warming her heart. "I don't care. We'll learn together." For 3 days, they remained in Copper Creek, carefully avoiding public places while waiting for word from Helena. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Judge Parker came to the hotel with news. "The governor has issued warrants for the arrest of Silverton's entire board of directors," he announced triumphantly. "Federal marshals are being dispatched to seize company records and secure the mines. Hawkins and his men have already been apprehended attempting to flee the territory." Relief washed over Penelope like a physical sensation. "It's really over then. Justice is being served," the judge confirmed. "And there's more. The governor was so impressed by your father's geological surveys that he's offering you first right to file a claim on the gold deposit your father discovered." Daniel squeezed Penelope's hand. "Your father's dream for you, a better life, it can still come true." Penelope looked at him, this man who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. "It already has." 1 month later, Penelope stood on the porch of Daniel's cabin, their cabin now, watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and crimson. She wore a simple white dress adorned with wildflowers, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. Behind her, Martha Jenkins fussed with the final touches. "Stand still, child. This ribbon isn't cooperating." Inside, the cabin had been transformed. Fresh-cut pine boughs decorated the walls, and candles cast a warm glow over the gathered guests, the Russell family, Judge Parker and his wife, and a handful of neighbors who had welcomed Penelope into their community. The door opened, and Thomas Russell stepped out. "They're ready for you, Penelope." Taking a deep breath, she entered the cabin on Thomas's arm, her eyes immediately finding Daniel. He stood before the fireplace beside the circuit preacher who had arrived that morning, looking handsome in a new shirt and vest. The bruises on his face had faded, leaving only the slightest reminder of what they had endured together. As she reached him, Daniel took her hands in his eyes shining with love and promise. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice catching. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with conviction born of shared danger and deeper understanding. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to Penelope's eyes. The celebration continued into the evening, with food and music and laughter filling the cabin that had once known such loneliness. As night fell, their guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone. Daniel closed the door behind the last visitor and turned to his wife. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, testing the name with evident pleasure. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, stepping into his embrace. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Penelope looked around the cabin that had become her sanctuary, then back to the man who had become her heart. "More than I ever thought possible." "The gold claim," he began, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "Can wait," she finished for him. "We have time now, Daniel. Time to build something together, something more precious than gold." He smiled, understanding in his eyes. "A life." "A life," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, pattering on the roof of the cabin. Inside, Penelope and Daniel Blackwood began their life together, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds in the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory. 5 years later, Penelope sat on the same porch, watching as Daniel taught their 4-year-old son, James, how to whittle a stick with a small knife. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, played at her feet with a rag doll Martha had made for her last Christmas. The cabin had expanded over the years. 2 additional rooms had been added, and a proper garden now flourished where once there had been only wild grass. The gold claim had indeed proved valuable, providing them with security and the means to improve their homestead, but they had chosen to remain in the mountains rather than move to the growing cities of the territory. "Mama, look," James called proudly, holding up his roughly carved creation. "It's a horse." "It's wonderful, darling," Penelope praised, though the object resembled a horse only in the most abstract sense. Daniel ruffled their son's hair, his eyes meeting Penelope's over the boy's head. The love that passed between them was as strong as ever, deepened by shared joys and sorrows, by the family they had created together. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Daniel and Penelope sat together on the porch swing he had built the previous summer. The moon cast silver light over the landscape, and the distant howl of a wolf echoed through the valley. "You ever regret it?" Daniel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Staying here instead of moving to Helena or back east? You could have had a different life." Penelope leaned into his embrace, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she fled into the woods that fateful day. "Never," she answered truthfully. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "I thank God every day for bringing you to these woods." "Even though I brought danger to your door," she teased, an old joke between them now. "Especially because of that," he replied, his voice warm with memory. "If not for Silverton's men, you might never have agreed to marry a rough mountain man like me." Penelope laughed softly. "I would have married you regardless, Daniel Blackwood. Some things are simply meant to be." As the stars wheeled overhead and their children slept peacefully inside the home they had built together, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the terrified, wounded young woman hiding in a hollow tree to the confident wife and mother she had become, it was a transformation born of both hardship and love. Daniel had found her when she was alone and weak, offering shelter when she needed it most. But what had grown between them was far more than gratitude or obligation. It was a love forged in adversity, tested by fire, and proven unbreakable. In the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory, amid the dangers and beauties of the untamed West, Penelope Fletcher Blackwood had found not just shelter, but home. Not just safety, but belonging. Not just a protector, but a partner. And as she turned her face up to her husband's for a kiss, she knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this life was the greatest treasure of all.